Let's talk about this damn Days of Our Lives, who falls all the way to number 9 in my rankings. In October, I rated Days of Our Lives number 4, and I will once again get to why I ended up doing that, and also, of course, why it fell so much here for November. Now, I probably put Days a little too high in my rankings for October, but since it was my first rankings ever of soap operas on this channel, I wanted to give it some credit for being one of the more entertaining soap operas all year round. That I needed to boost its rating for October, even though it wasn't quite as good in October as the 9 months prior. But now in November, I can say that Days has completely shit the bed, in my opinion. And Days of Our Lives is my soap. I talked about this last time that, this is the soap I've watched the longest. So I feel like when it's good, I'm going to praise it. But when it's bad, I'm going to have to hammer it down. And there has been so little positives in November that my notes are almost all negatives, and we have to start with the possession story, which is the main story on the show, and possibly why it seems to be falling apart at the seams. The story is a joke, is really what it comes down to for me, and that anybody tuning into this show that's not a longtime viewer isn't gonna like it. It's a joke. It's stupid. And I give Days credit for being entertaining sometimes, and I will give Ron credit for knowing how to be entertaining. But there comes a point where you go too far, and if everything comes off as a joke, why are we calling it a soap opera? So yeah, the possession story is a campy mess. Nowhere near the scariness of the first time around back in the 90s. And we had to deal with those zombies, which was a big part of my low grade for Days this month of November. I could not deal with that zombie story at the beginning of November. It only lasted a few episodes, but it was really painful. And then the characters are just supposed to go back to normal after that. Like there's no real consequences for the ridiculousness of the story. And I've heard theories that maybe this is all just Johnny's screenplay for the show, for the movie he's writing about Marlena, and that this isn't really happening in Salem. But that's not a great cop out either. That just means the last few months would be a big waste of time. So they write themselves into these corners on the show a lot, and I'm not gonna fucking praise it. I'm sorry. It's the possession is a fucking flop. It's a flop, and I don't care if Days fans will be mad at me for saying this. You got to be grounded in reality. Like I feel like the story has two sides. There's people that love the original possession story, and there's people that hate it and stopped watching Days. But the show did pick up on ratings during the first story. But this time around, it's lost any momentum. It started to gain over the summer with its ratings, and it fell back down. So on a ratings level, the story is a failure. On an overall entertainment, I don't think it's that entertaining. It's too stupid for me to be entertaining. But I feel like what they're trying to do with this story is thread it through a lot of stories with the devil causing havoc in Salem, but it's really just messing with those stories, in my opinion, as well. So all around the possession story for me, I said I hoped it ends soon. It hasn't ended soon enough for me. It's going to be dragged on at least another month. Can it be over by the end of the year? Please let it be over by the end of the year. But I'm starting to fear that it won't be over by the end of the year. I'm going to get back to this at the end of this video, but we got to talk about some of these other stories that aren't working on the show, and there's a lot of them. Bonnie and Justin is a big fat fucking no for me. We got Nicole and Rafe, and we keep having to flash back to them fucking, and it's really disturbing and not entertaining at all. These two do not make a good couple. We're really going to pretend like Nicole's going to fall in love with Rafe. Why is Rafe still a character on this show? I talked about this last time too. The character of Rafe has never really worked, but they shove it down everybody's throat. But now they're shoving this coupling down people's throat, and that ain't working either. I'm not going to quite touch upon the subject yet because I know there's a lot of Sin fans, and I don't have like what I have to say about Sin is not all negative, It's also not all positive. So I don't feel like getting into Sin yet. Well, there'll be another time for me to talk about my thoughts on the pairing of Sin in general. Um, and look, they have great chemistry for sure. There's no denying that. I just feel like they've done way too much to try and make the character of Ben work, and it's another thing that hinders the show and hinders them as a couple. And because they wrote Ben into a corner, it's another case of this show writing something into a corner and then not really knowing how to get the fuck out of it and then having problems. But what I am going to say about Sin is I don't like them wanting to have a baby. Really, we need a baby story for Sin. That's not working for me either. So yeah, like I said, it's all negative, and Young and the Restless is so boring. That's why it's always going to be last place until it starts to actually get somewhat interesting. EastEnders is working its way up. So if Days stays this much of a mess, I don't know if Days is going to be able to not drop even lower in my rankings. But back to the possession, I know like we're supposed to be like, yay, Eileen Davidson is back in Christian as like evil Kristen, where the devil's morphing into Kristen. And then we have the other actress, Stacy, playing real Kristen and playing Susan. So we have basically two different people playing Kristen. And for me, that's not that big of a problem, honestly, if they want to have two different actresses playing Kristen, because obviously Eileen Davidson has a history with Marlena and John, and they want to show flashbacks of that. So I don't have a big issue with them there being two Kristens. I've seen a lot of people talking about that, but quite frankly, like I've been saying, this show has bigger issues than two Kristens. It just does. It has a creative direction that's falling apart at the seams because Ron tends to go overboard on all of his shows that he's written. There comes a point where he gets way too fucking campy and always goes too far, and we're at that point. Even though I don't feel like it's Ron's fault in this instance, because he said in interviews that it wasn't his idea to write Marlene's Possession. So the problems fall on Ken Corday. I think they were kind of hoping to gain momentum with this story, that it would be another ratings grab and help out the ratings. It isn't. It's just a half-assed possession storyline is what it is. It's half-assed and way too campy. Now, the story that almost saved Days for me has been, Paulina and Abe, and just Jack A. Harris herself. And I look, it was a small wedding. There wasn't a lot of people in attendance. That's going to happen on soap operas in this day and age in America because they don't have the budget for big events. But, you know, I enjoyed the non-wedding and the truth coming out about Paulina being Lonnie's dad and Abe's not really her father. So Paulina and Abe don't get married because of that reason. I thought there was some good acting by Sal and obviously Jack A. So this story almost made me put Days a little bit higher. But then I looked back at my notes and how fucking negative it was, and I just couldn't do it. So Days will be in ninth place for now. It's kind of fixable, but it's also kind of not because they have written themselves into a corner with this devil possession story that's so over the top, and they're trying to weave it into all these stories, but it's not really working. Yeah. So we'll see what I feel about in December. I know there's going to be another Peacock Days. They're doing a Christmas movie special. I will include that in the rating if it's entertaining, like Beyond Salem was great. So maybe this movie will help Days' rating for December. But until now, that's where we are with it. Ninth place, Days is going downhill for now.